Nobody has it worse! You scream at the TV as your team loses a Thursday afternoon game to the White Sox, dropping their division lead to a mere 7 games. But who actually has it worse? This is a question that's been bouncing around in my head for years now. Who are the top 10 most miserable fan bases? First off, let's talk scope. I originally wanted to include the last 30 seasons, which would place us from 1995 to 2024. Because, in a fair and just world, 30 years, 30 teams, every team should have at least one World Series win in that window. But a couple teams didn't exist in 1995. So to keep this exercise totally fair and totally balanced, we're going to have to start in 1998. I understand there are some people in my audience who weren't even alive then. I get it. I was but a homunculus growing in a lab that eventually turned into the music-loving ball Jesus that you see before you. At the same time, starting in 98 gives us the biggest possible umbrella to capture the full scope of misery. So, what metrics am I using to determine the most miserable fan bases? Thank you for asking, dear viewer. Buckle up, because there are a lot, but I'll try to get through them quickly. I came up with a balance between positive and negative measures. I always like to look on the bright side of life, so let's start with the positive measures. First, we're starting with kind of a weird one: home playoff wins. Anybody who has experienced one of these in person understands the euphoria that comes with it. Ask a board member of any team, slip them some truth serum, and I bet they'd tell you this is really what it's all about. Even for me, I'd rather my team win 2 home games while losing a division series than win only 1 home game, advance, then get swept in the championship series. Even in a season that doesn't end with a trophy or pennant, I'd argue winning at least 5 home games during a playoff run is close to equal in emotional value. I mean, just look at the 2024 Mets. Maybe that's just me, but next time your team is in the playoffs, think about how cathartic a win at home is. Next up, we have the usual suspects: World Series wins, pennants, and division titles. And I did stack these on each other, so if you win the World Series, your team is still given credit for winning the pennant as well. This is all pretty self-explanatory. I have weighted World Series trophies more heavily than any other metric, but I didn't want it to be weighed so heavily that winning one would be an automatic disqualifier for the top 10. Trust me, I get it. It's the ultimate goal, defeating the final boss. But as you'll see, winning doesn't heal all wounds. I also mixed in 100 plus win seasons and 95 plus win seasons. These ones I didn't stack. Anyone whose team has had a 100 plus win season in the last 20 plus years will talk about it the same way they talk about their honeymoon, even if their team didn't win the World Series that year. Save for a few cases, it pretty much guarantees a cakewalk to a division title. Just pure end-to-end domination. Same logic applies to 95 plus win seasons with fewer extremities. We also have our MVPs, Cy Youngs, and top 10 draft hits. I'll talk about that last one more in the next section. Because everyone here, that brings us to our negative numbers. This is why you clicked on the video. It's in, it's what sells. Let's get into it. First off, on the flip side of 100 plus win seasons, we have 100 plus loss seasons. Any of you who have had the displeasure of watching a 100 plus loss team will tell me how agonizingly brutal the experience is. They'll have you quoting Nietzsche by the 9th inning. Same with 95 plus loss seasons. Anything under, in my opinion, and your team was at least a fluky month away from playing meaningful baseball in September. Next up, we have undeserving lone all-stars. For those of you who may be unaware, every team needs at least one representative in the MLB All-Star game. Because of that rule, we've seen a handful of players who were selected not by their own personal merits, but because their team had to send somebody. Now don't get me wrong, many bad teams have had deserving players, but there is a public embarrassment when your team sends somebody who just didn't deserve to be there. And it shows the national audience that there is simply no reason to watch your team. On that same train of thought, we have top 10 draft bust. Getting a top 10 draft pick can sometimes be enough compensation to stomach a god-awful season. It should be cashed in as a sure thing, but either due to a bad draft class, poor scouting, or poor development, not all of them pan out. And it sucks. I'm defining a bust as having less than 5 career RWAR. This also includes players who did not sign. We can argue semantics here all day, but I wanted to at least be somewhat lenient on the definition of a bust. I also was pretty forgiving for anyone taken in the last 5 drafts because it's still too early to tell, even as far back as 2020, which was 5 years ago now, jeez. Because of the chaotic nature of the draft, I didn't want to overly punish teams who found themselves in the top 10 over and over and over again. So I decided to give them equal credit for top 10 draft hits. Now when I say hit, I'm talking about drafting a franchise-defining talent. Next up, we have scandals and off-field trauma. This one I had to make a judgment call on. Most teams have been in the news for the wrong reasons at least once in the past 30 years. So I asked myself, how bad is it? I judged it on a scale of 1 to 10. For example, the Astros cheating scandal nets them a strong 10. That was a national storyline that Astros fans are still feeling the effects from to this day. It sucks. You weren't the ones cheating. You didn't know they were doing it when you celebrated in 2017. Like, why are people making you feel guilty for it? Then we have Game 7 losses. Now the title is something of a misnomer because it isn't exclusive to Game 7s, but number of losses in season-clinching games. We're talking wildcard games, Game 5s of Division Series, and of course, our Game 7s. One where your season continues if you win, and it ends if you lose. A Game 7 loss is a unique form of torture because you get so close to the final round, only to have it stripped away from you at the last second. You start playing all these different scenarios in your head. What if we pinch hit for X in the 7th? What if our starter had a little more gas in Game 5? What if our guy was able to get that knock with the bases loaded back in April? What if the fall of the Western Roman Empire never happened? It's torturous. It's exhausting. I'd almost rather be swept or not be there at all. Finally, we have 25 plus WAR and 50 plus WAR players traded. Basically, I wanted to capture the amount of great and legend, wait for it, dairy players traded away by each team. We are strictly talking trades here. If a player plays out their contract and signs with another team, sure, it hurts, but there's something about them getting traded that signals an institutional failure at some level. For me, it was tough seeing Max Fried walk, but at least he got to leave on his terms. It would have been 1,000 times more devastating if he got surprise traded during his final season. This category was yet another judgment call. First off, I had to project a bit using Fangraph's zip tool for active players. So there will be some guys who fall short of those thresholds, but are a statistical certainty to reach them by the time they retire. Second, there were a few use cases that I didn't count. Mostly older players who maybe signed a 1-year deal with a new team and were traded at the deadline. Really any player who your team never felt the true impact of. Like when the Angels traded Josh Hamilton back to the Rangers because he stunk for them. I'm not going to sit here feeling sorry for Angels fans because, oh, he was the one who got away, just imagine if we kept Josh Hamilton. I will also give it to teams who traded away a prospect who ended up blossoming into a great player. But everybody here gather around. This category is dedicated to the fans who've had to watch their best players constantly get traded because your team refuses to extend them and would rather get more lottery tickets than invest into something meaningful. As always, I rate each category. Instead of doing a ranking system, I'm doing a point system this time. I just think it works out better for this kind of exercise. Full list is available to my patrons on Patreon. Please consider becoming one. Also excluding 2020 again because that year wasn't real. I have all my data, so let's get into the top 10 most miserable fan bases according to my Fan Misery Index. But first, a word from this video's sponsor. Take a swing at picking baseball this season on Underdog. Underdog is a leading place to make all of your sports picks, and you can play now in your state. Their app has over 100,000 5-star reviews and millions of players. To play, all you have to do is download the app and choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats. You can choose from things like home runs, strikeouts, total bases, and so much more. Watching my gritty Tigers today, it is a day game. They're facing a lefty. For that reason, I'm going to go higher for Spencer Torkelson, runs, hits, and RBI. Bailey Falter, I know the Tigers do strike out a lot as a team, but I'm just going to go lower for him. I think they're going to chase him by the 4th inning. Let's do one more pick. Let's do Gleyber Torres here. I think he's also going to have a good game. Higher for runs, hits, and RBI. Once your picks feel good, you can play for as little as $1. Sign up now using our promo code NMF to unlock a special offer where you can receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Download the Underdog app and start making picks today. So during the editing process for this video, I realized I unfortunately overlooked a major off-field trauma for one of the teams on this list. It ended up shaking the final results up a lot. I had to do some last-minute rewrites, but there may still be a few inconsistencies with the numbering in the script. Originally, I covered 12 teams because I had 2 ties. Now I only have 1. I'm still covering those 12 teams, but now I'm starting at 11 instead of 10. Apologies in advance. I hope it's not too confusing. I wanted to keep the integrity of the list first and foremost, so thank you for bearing with me. Coming tied at number 11, we have the artist formerly known as the Montreal Expos. Some people criticize me grouping the Nationals and Expos together for the Final Out video, and I get it. If my team moved to a different country, I probably wouldn't root for them anymore. Nor should the people who are as close as humanly possible to the US Capitol building in DC embrace their former team's identity when it literally revolved around playing in a different country's province whose main language isn't even English. But I believe in the Nationals' case, you can replace the years as the Expos with league average misery, and they'd still find themselves riding around this spot. But because of that discrepancy, I'll give them the wrong end of the tie for 11th place, even with the World Series trophy. The Nationals are a true enigma. Most teams don't get the luck of the draw, being able to take the consensus number 1 overall pick. Lock of all locks, 2. Count them, 2 years in a row. Most teams don't spend what felt like a decade not being able to push through the next barrier. Always stuck in third gear, playing through some heartbreaking collapses. Most teams don't win the World Series after losing one of those number 1 overall picks in free agency. Most teams get to be greeted with a sold-out crowd the opening day after winning it all. Most teams don't go from winning the World Series to absolutely sucking, save for the Marlins, who, I'm not going to be coy with you here. We both know they're going to show up later in this list. I understand some teams have a World Series hangover. Some mark the end of a dynasty or magnetic core. But even those teams are nowhere near losing 97 games less than 2 years after hoisting up the trophy. Recently, they just fired the brain trust that got them to the final boss. Time will only tell if that was ultimately the right decision. This is a fan base who was introduced to this franchise under inauspicious circumstances. One who had to scrub itself clean of its previous identity, save for one jersey throwback in July of 2019. Which, look, just note the year. Maybe bring it back. I mean, we got to see Juan Soto in an Expos jersey. This is a fan base who got pocket aces 2 years in a row. Both those players worked out and were able to play out their rookie contracts and then some, for better or worse. But it just isn't enough. It doesn't make up for the years spent in the dweller before and after it all worked. We'll see what a new voice inside the front office does. This team has the pieces to make something special. Now it's up to that new voice to pull the right levers. I really hope I can rerun these calculations in a few years and find this fan base a safe distance away from the top of the misery index. Tied with the Nationals, we have the Motor City Kitties, also known as the Detroit Tigers. They may be tied with the Nationals, but they are a completely different flavor of miserable. At least the Expos/National fans had guys like Vlad
Guerrero
and James Wood when their teams stunk. Who the hell did the Tigers have? Their 2002 All-Star Game representative was Robert Fick. When the times were good, they were good. But they were the only team who got Dombrowski'd and didn't have a World Series ring to show for it. They had to pay the piper. But they didn't even get rid of their rat infestation. They ended up trading a pitcher who they thought was washed. A legend and surefire Hall of Famer for sure, but washed, only to see him rack up 2 more Cy Young awards, and now you're not even sure if he's wearing your team's logo on his plaque. The return you got for him wasn't even worth the plane ride to Houston, and your franchise entered another death spiral a la the early 2000s. However, as certain as the sun is to rise, the Tigers are good again. Convincingly so. The team has answered every question it's needed to thus far, and a deep run this October would not only solidify them as a force to be reckoned with for quite some time, it'll certainly pull them away from the top 10 of the Fan Misery Index. Coming in at number 10, we have the San Diego Padres. I made the award-winning video on the Padres-Dodgers rivalry back in June, and yeah, it made me realize just how bad these fans have had it. What's especially frustrating is that after they were bookmarked for the seemingly infinite financial resources needed to make a certain run, they still fell short. This current era of Padres baseball has an air of disappointment to it. Sure, it's better than the decade they spent in, say it with me, irrelevance during the 2010s, but Padres fans can't help but feel a sense of letdown that they were able to acquire all of this talent, and the best they got out of it was a single NLDS series win against the Dodgers. It was electric, it was a core memory for all the diehards, but that's it? This team also fumbled so many good players. These buffoons even broke my great players traded metric. I set it up in my head thinking it would mostly account for players who get traded after 4 or 5 years of service time on their rookie contract, while catching a few prospects here and there who became great after getting traded. But this is a team who sent away Trey Turner, Max Fried, and James Wood before they ever became something. Imagine the Padres if they had Trey Turner on their team patrolling center and Max Fried in the starting rotation during the 2021 season. Or hell, if they had James Wood manning left field this year. I know I'm violating the butterfly effect or the fallacy of predetermined outcomes or whatever, but those are some players the fan base imagines the what ifs for, and it makes their stomach turn. Losing a prime year of the guy you locked up to a lifetime contract because he didn't know what an HGH was is also a major punch in the gut. Somehow, someway, the Padres still find themselves in a playoff position this year, despite making their left fielder a new fan every night as part of a team-wide promotion and using 2 corpses to catch for them. This is another team that if everything breaks right this year, something that never happens to them, they can find themselves on the outside looking in of the Fan Misery Index. I swear I'm going to stop this bit. I really wanted this to be the Twilight Zone. I'm sorry. By the way, we are about halfway through the video, and my handlers told me this is where I need to ask you to subscribe if you haven't already. It helps the channel grow a ton, and I make pretty good stuff, so you won't regret it. Okay, back to the video. Of course, the Seattle Mariners at number 9. When I asked people on Twitter who they thought truly has it worse, this became the cool guy dark horse answer. The hey, if you really think about it, if you really add the numbers up right, this could be the team. But they only come in at number 8. Because I spent the last 7 or so minutes focusing on why the previous teams deserve to be here, let's take a second to show why the Mariners shouldn't be any higher. First off, they've stayed relatively clean of any major scandals or off-field trauma. The Cano suspension sucked, and the less we say about Kevin Mather, the better. But there are some fan bases who would beg for those to be the worst off-field issues they had to endure. I understand you had to watch Griffey himself beg and plead until he was traded as far away from your city as possible. Then, 10 years later, witness the opposite side of that coin, when your star, who embodied your city, was reluctantly traded to the team who has owned it for years. But at least you kept getting talent, enough that there were at least a few memorable Septembers, even if it ended in an empty stadium come October. I find it both funny and sad that 3 of the first 4 teams on this list are entering August with a chance to jetpack their way off of it. I'll avoid repeating myself, but the Mariners seriously have a strong roster this year. The Astros, God's chosen son, are somehow still the biggest obstacle. I know your pain, Mariners fans. You've been in this position before, and have seen this team perpetually fall flat on its face every time. But they always provide a glimmer of hope. Because of that, the Mariners are a deserving number 8 on the Fan Misery. I'm not doing it again. I said I wasn't doing it again. Let's move on. I told you, scandals and off-field trauma only gets worse from here. Number 7, we have the Athletics. Look, I understand you can make the argument that having your team stripped from you should result in automatic grounds for most miserable fan base. Unfortunately, I just can't do that. I had to feed the data in the way it was presented, just like for every other team on this list. But I did make my first major judgment call. You know how I said that I'd use a 1 to 10 scale to rate how I felt about the totality of each team's major scandal / off-field trauma? Well, I lied. Kind of. I did that for 29 teams. For the Athletics, I rated on a scale of 1 to 15, and gave them the full 15. Losing your team after a years-long battle where your voice was put on the back burner is awful. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what that feels like. And I'd much rather be a Mariners fan in the year 2025 than an Athletics fan. But I think I'd rather be an Ace fan in the 2010s. I mean, you try to find Mariners highlights from that time outside of King Felix's perfect game, and it's like trying to find a boot in a hat store. But there are some pretty memorable Athletics highlights from that same time, including a perfect game. This time frame also captures the full scope of the post-Walt Haas era, a time where the fan base was pretty much force-fed the idea that they couldn't hold on to any player after their rookie contract expired, and impact free agent signings were strictly forbidden. Even I'm surprised they're not higher, especially considering the embarrassment of clinching losses they've had to endure. I mean, you want to talk about a fan base who was happy to see the 1-game wildcard go away? They finally phased it out in favor of the series, and then the Athletics stunk again. At one point in the early 2000s, they lost 4 straight ALDSs that went to 5 games. The advantage the Athletics have over the teams they look down upon, despite metric-breaking trauma, is that at least they've had their chances. This has been a well-performing team overall, and the past 4 years can't discredit that. At number 7, we have the Cincinnati Reds. Oh boy, where do we even start with this team? How about with this? The last Reds home playoff victory was Game 2 of the 1990 World Series. Yes, the last time the Reds sent their fans home happy in October was almost a year before Nevermind came out. This is just a fan base that hasn't experienced a ton of winning, not a ton of losing either. Kinda mild in the losing department compared to its peers, perpetually in stasis. They are a team who to outsiders have just kind of existed, even in their own division. Cardinals fans, speak up here. Hell, even Cubs and Brewers fans chime in. When was the last time you really felt threatened by the Reds? They're like the generic team that you'll see blend into the background of a sports movie montage. Kinda there to give more to the world building without having any real impact on its surrounding environment. I'm not trying to belittle you great Reds fans out there. I love you all. I feel for your situation, not being the protagonist in your own story. I understand, it's the stupid Castellini family. They're so bad they make you cry for Marge Schott at night. Doesn't help that Bob looks like he anamorphed from a chipmunk, and his son looks like the personification of a secondhand car wash. But look on the bright side. At least you got to see your guy play his final game in a Reds uniform. Just ignore him trying to make a spot on the Blue Jays roster a year later. That never happened. Unfortunately, as things change, they stay the same. Now you have a new franchise cornerstone. He's fun as hell to watch too. MLB is actually choosing to promote one of your players for once, but ownership keeps refusing to push their chips in. You begin to wonder if they had any chips in the first place. The future can be promising, but it was also promising in 2010 when you got Joey Votto, just like it was in 2000 when you got Ken Griffey Jr. Oh god, what have we gotten ourselves into? At number 6, we have the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays are weird, perhaps the weirdest team there is. I know I called the Nationals an enigma, but I swear I didn't just run out of words to describe these teams. They're different brands of weird in my opinion. The Rays have never operated like a regular franchise. They came into this world on a whimper. It's like they didn't even really need to exist for their first 10 seasons. And then they hired a bunch of Ivy League graduates to run their front office, and suddenly they're the model franchise on a plumber's salary. It means that you're going to see immense talent spawn out of nowhere, but it also means you won't be able to keep that massive talent around for long. You know, like, nobody retires a Ray. Well, except for Wade Boggs, and Fred McGriff, and of course, Jay Watasic. But you know what I'm saying, nobody's playing their entire career for this team. That was, until they locked up Wander Franco to an 11-year deal. Unfortunately, he got locked up in a Dominican jail after it came out that he was in an arranged relationship with a 14-year-old girl. And then their stadium's roof blows off during a hurricane a year later. And now they're temporarily homeless, while their stadium situation is still up in the air, pending a recently agreed to sale of the team. Just normal, fun stuff for any average fan base to experience. No, this all sucks. That's why I gave them a cool 10 points on the scandal/off-field trauma scale. I understand, there has been a lot of winning. This has been one of the best teams in baseball for the last decade now. But at what cost? Number 5, we have the Baltimore Orioles. A team a lot of you pegged as having it the worst. I would love to know how many people would mention them had I asked this question either this time last year or even this time next year. This is a franchise that just can't put together any momentum. Currently, they're rocking an 11-game playoff losing streak. After putting together some genuinely purpose-built teams in the late 90s, they've only been able to deliver an October victory at Camden once in the last 27 years. You know, their colors do kind of match Spirit Halloween's. The late 2010s into the early 2020s were a bloodbath. Rosters full of players you kind of felt bad having to watch struggle in a league they either weren't ready for or had passed them completely. This team never saw that massive sell-off, but maybe it's because there just weren't a ton of pieces to trade for in the first place. Some of them were pieces you didn't even realize you had. Just like with the Padres, the little reward you've gotten in the past couple of years doesn't make up for the fact that you had to watch your team send a dilapidated Ty Wigginton to Anaheim for the 2010 All-Star Game. And at least the Padres got to give their fans a couple of moments before they eventually sputtered. The Orioles are in a comfortable slot at number 5 in the Fan Misery Index. I said I wouldn't do that, but it's too good. Too good. I need to rewatch some Twilight Zone. The Rockies sneak out of the top 3 by virtue of either actually knowing what it's like to make a deep postseason run or not trading off a player as soon as they start asking for a little bit more money so they can pay rent. Otherwise, this is a miserable team, and it's only getting worse. This is the first team on the list where there truly is no silver cloud. The Rockies stood a chance when they could attract and or develop good hitters, but they haven't even been able to do that recently. I could spend hours talking about the Coors effect and the unique difficulty it's presented to an unimaginative and disturbingly insular front office. But we've all heard this story before, and I'll probably wind up getting way too involved in it later this year. Starting the top 3, we have the Kansas City Royals. The top 3 most miserable fan bases should be obvious to you by this point. It's kind of like ranking the top 3 players in baseball between Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, and whoever just had the monster season. You know they're all going to be there, but the order carries a lot of significance. It may seem insane that 2 of those teams won a World Series, but I mean, be honest with yourself. I'm going to give you a 30-year window. Would you rather your team win 1 World Series in that window, but lose 100 games in the other 29 seasons? Or would you rather root for a team who doesn't deliver you a trophy, but is making the postseason in half those years? I know you're going to say you'd rather the World Series. Oh, flags fly forever. Oh, you precious you. But really take a second to think about what a 100-loss season entails. This isn't a team that's making plans for October. They're making plans for July. The back-to-back pennants topped off by a World Series victory was nice, but does it really make up for 7 100-loss seasons since '98? That's 3 more than the next highest, by the way. Does it make up for all those seasons leading to draft bust after draft bust, save for a Zach Greinke here and a Bobby Witt Jr. there? Does it really make up for shipping the Zach Greinke's and Carlos Beltrons out? I don't think so, and the Fan Misery Index seems to agree. So should you. Number 2, we have the Miami Marlins. Elephant in the room. I gave them a strong 9 for scandal/off-field trauma, mostly due to the death of pitcher Jose Fernandez. That is a loss that fans are still processing to this day and has had untold ramifications on this franchise as a whole. The other elephant in this room is, how accurate is this index really? I mean, they won a World Series. Worse than the Rockies? How bad could it really be? Well, let me show you this. This would be my ballot for all-time Marlins starting 9 during this time frame. In my opinion, this is a pretty nasty lineup. In fact, I would argue it would be a top 10 lineup if you did this exercise for every team. Do you want to know how many of these players the Marlins traded? All of them. I became exhausted over the number of trades this team made, not just from having to compile them all, but emotionally by putting myself in the shoes of a Marlins fan having to process every single one. I honestly kind of understand why there aren't a ton of Marlins fans out there. I know there are several factors in play as to why this team can't establish a solid market in Miami, but I think trading away every single player who has meant something to this franchise is a good start. Unlike their cross-state counterpart, whose fans deal with the same emotional whirlwind, the Marlins have not experienced a single dominant regular season. They've never won a division, never won more than 100 games, let alone 95. That's a tough proposition to sign up for. Number 1, we have the Pittsburgh Pirates, the fan base that can truly say, nobody has it worse. The unfortunate truth is, there really isn't any interesting angle to break down why they landed here. Everything is bad across the board, and we all know why. Bob Nutting and Kevin McCheapskate before him. According to Sarah Langs, their largest free agent contract was a 3-year deal given to Francisco Liriano in 2015. Sure, they've given extensions to Ke'Bryan Hayes and Brian Reynolds, but look at how that's turned out for them. Other teams' fan bases are already coming up with mock trades for their franchise-defining starting pitcher. He's still got 5 years left of team control after the season. He's not arbitration eligible until 2027. That just doesn't happen with other franchises, and it's because this team was designed in a lab to lose. At least the Marlins tried a couple of times before blowing it all up for the umpteenth time. Seriously, I don't have anything else interesting to say. Obviously, this was most people's answer. You didn't really watch this video to find out that Pirates fans have truly had it worse. You already knew that. What you might have forgotten was that this team refused to trade their lights-out closer to the trigger-happy Dodgers at his peak value, only for him to get arrested for committing some truly hideous crimes involving a minor a few months later. Yeah, that sucks. It's not Wander Franco territory, but I would contemplate diving into the shallow end of the Allegheny if something like that happened to my team. And it's not going to get any better. Even the Marlins are assembling something close to a competent roster right now. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is your team's starting shortstop. The Rockies at least have a World Series appearance. The Pirates last appeared in a World Series the same year Apocalypse Now was released. The Royals at least have Bobby Witt Jr. locked up. Who's the Pirates starting shortstop again? The Orioles at least have pieces of a strong core. The Pirates have Cabrian Hayes. The Rays have at least been a good team. The Pirates have the second worst record in baseball since 1993. The Reds have Ellie De La Cruz. You probably know by now who's playing. Thank you all for watching. Let me know what you think of the Fan Misery Index. Are there any tweaks you would make to it? Any measures you would add or take away? Do you have any disagreements? I would love to know. I know my response game has been fairly weak as of late, but I promise I'll be in the comments section discussing the list with you all this time. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you. Apologies for the lighting. I'm doing red light therapy in order to cleanse myself of this list, but I wanted to introduce my new level 2 ball wizard. We have Moist and our new level 3 ball god, Arrow. Arrow gave me a video suggestion that I will fulfill. I'm actually super excited to work on it. Again, you can become a level 3 ball god or level 2 ball wizard or level 1 ball knower at patreon.com/nomorefielders. It will also be where this full list is available. Thank you all so much.